I'm so glad to have today on my show Mark Katz. He's a professor at George Mason University and a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Good afternoon, Mark.
Hello, good to be here.
I'm going to ask you about Russia's interest in the Middle East. In 2005, it rose significantly. Russian President Vladimir Putin visited Saudi Arabia in 2007. Can we consider that visit as a turning point in the nature of the relationship between Russia and the Arab world?
Well, actually, I would date the turning point to 2003, when then King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia visited Moscow. And I think that the important thing about this visit and to understand is that one of the reasons why Russia became more influential in the Arab world is because Arab states wanted it to be influential.
Mm-hmm. We know that Sergei Lavrov announced that the Russian investment in the Middle East with Arab countries is almost have implemented. I mean, about 400 investment projects worth $40 billion. This is in 2019. How it's look like right now?
You know, I think the thing about these figures for Russian investments is that a lot of these are agreements to invest, but the investments haven't actually been made. And the thing about Russia is that you know it just doesn't have as much money as does either China or Europe or the United States. So I have a feeling that these investments just aren't as important as the economic relationships between the Arab world and China on the one hand and the West on the other.
Mm-hmm. What about the cooperation in energy? It's among the important priorities in Russian policy towards the Arab region. How do you elaborate?
Yes, this is very important. And of course, for a long time, they really didn't collaborate. You know, Russia would not abide by OPEC production limits. And then in 2016, they decided to do so. But then everything broke down in the spring of 2020, and there was a price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia. And of course, the Saudis won because they produce oil at much cheaper cost. And so now I think what we see is that Saudi Arabia and Russia, through the OPEC plus format, they have been able to stabilize their cooperation, and it's been beneficial to them both.
How does, in your opinion, Moscow's relationship with Iran affect its relationship with the Arab world? And we see a military cooperation that appeared recently in Ukraine.
Yes, well, this is a very complicating factor. Obviously, there are a lot of Arab countries that are fearful of Iran, and so they're not so happy about Russian cooperation with that country. And I think that what we've seen, though, is that the Russians aren't necessarily concerned about whether they are liked. In other words, the way they typically operate is that they balance between adversaries. So, if Arab countries don't like what Russia is doing with Iran, well, the Russian point of view is, well, we'll sell you weapons too, we'll do things with you. Give us an incentive to work with you to limit what Iran is doing. But I think now that the Ukraine war has taken place, what we're seeing is that Russia is becoming more dependent on Iran, for these drones and perhaps ballistic missiles, even military advisors in the war against Ukraine. Even the Chinese are not doing anything like this. They're not helping Russia like this. But Iran is, and I can't help but feel that this means that Russia has to basically return the favor and lean more toward Iran than toward the Arab states.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the prospects for Russian-Emirati relations in light of global changes and the emerge of a central role for the UAE? Recently, we saw this in the mediation to release Brittany Griner.
Right. Well, I think that United Arab Emirates obviously plays a very important role diplomatically, and they have been very successful at maneuvering between the U.S., Russia, China. It really is quite remarkable. And I think that, the UAE has been a place where Russia can, still do business with. And it's so important to the West that the U.S. really can't do an awful lot about it. And certainly, I think that the recent role that the UAE played in bringing about the release of Brittany Griner helps sort of, Washington see that even if that UAE is getting along with Russia can in fact be useful for the U.S. In some instances as well.
But in the other hand, it is reported that the Biden administration is disturbed by pumping Russian money into the UAE economy or market to escape the U.S. sanctions on Russia. But in UAE or in UAE laws, there is no obligation, and they can't bound to these sanctions.
Well, that's absolutely right. The UAE obviously is not abiding by Western sanctions. There's other countries that aren't either. Certainly India and there are other Arab countries. Even Israel is not abiding by these sanctions. So I think just what it shows is that in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine is just not the highest priority. That for Middle Eastern, for Arab countries in particular, it's Iran is a much higher priority, and they're just acting on their interests. The U.S. doesn't like this, and I can understand why, but I think this is simply the situation which we have to live with.
Are we witnessing now the return of multipolarity as a result of the Russian presence in the Arab region? And what is the position of the United States in this regard?
Well, that's a very good question. And I would say that, before the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, that was definitely the situation, that Russia seemed to be getting more influential. But now that Russia is devoting so much of its resources to the war in Ukraine, I think that a question has arisen, just how active can it be in the Middle East? There's already been reports that they're drawing down air defense missile systems from Syria, that they may even be, bringing, armed forces out of Syria. Obviously, they're still there, but the thing is that, with the war in Ukraine, they just cannot play as active a role in the Middle East. And so obviously they're an important factor, but I don't think, because if they had won the war in Ukraine, then I think we would see a tremendous role for Russia in the Middle East. But that has not happened. And I don't think it's, even if they somehow win now, it's going to be an exhausted Russia.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your answer. Thank you for this interview. Thank you for your time. Mark Katz, you are most welcome.
Thank you so very much.
Hey, Maria Malouf here. Please click to like and subscribe to Maria Malouf TV YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.